Right, good morning everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name's Amy, I work for Training ByteSize, and I'm absolutely thrilled that you're all joining us this morning for the APM PFQ exam tips webinar. Now you'll see on the side of your screen there's an option to send messages and chat. So I would encourage you to do that throughout the session if you've got any questions coming through. We're going to pause probably about 15 minutes in and answer any questions that you have. So please just keep those messages coming through. Okay, so first of all, before we kick off, I just want to just tell you a little bit about Training ByteSize and who I'm here with today. So first of all, I'm joined by Terry Kent. Now, Terry is our lead APM trainer. He's got an incredible background working for BT for nearly 40 years. He's worked in projects of all shapes and sizes, and back in 2014, he decided to become a project management trainer. So he's got a really unique background and aspect that he brings to his training and also to the session that you'll be hearing today. So I'm absolutely delighted that he's going to be here. In terms of a little bit about Training ByteSize, I'd say we're a fairly small company, but we have really big ambitions. So we approach everything in a family way. So it's a family-run business. And that ethos underpins absolutely everything we do. So that's what this session is all about. We don't just sell training, we're here to help you support you throughout it and make sure that you pass the exam. And that is why we are absolutely thrilled with our average pass rate of 99%, because we support everybody throughout. So without further ado, I think we should just crack on and begin. So like I mentioned, you've got chat on the right of your screen, so do please submit any questions that you've got. Prior to the session today, we did ask people to come back to us. Sorry, that's my dog, excuse that. Come back to us and tell us a little bit about what you wanted to talk about today. And quite a lot of you said that you wanted to recap materials that were in PFQ, as well as looking at exam tips. So we've actually chosen to split the webinar in those two ways. So submit your questions regarding exam tips. Like I say, we're going to pause after about 15 minutes. And then after that, we will get straight on to going into materials. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Terry.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Terry Kent. Thanks for the introduction, Amy. Make me sound very old, though, 40 years working at BT. Look, let's get on. What I'm going to do is, as Amy said, we're going to start off talking about exam format and exam technique and hints and tips around the PFQ exam, and then we'll have a short question and answer session. Then we'll move on to covering just some general topics, just to get the discussion going. But the purpose of the session really is to make sure you're prepared for your exam, understand how the exam is going to go ahead. So please feel free to ask any questions at all. The best way to do that is using that chat, as Amy has said. And so let's look at the first slide, which is about exam format. Now, hopefully, because you've already done your training, you're probably already familiar with the format of the exam. I just want to go through it. And in fact, you may have already done some mock papers or some sample papers to get prepared. So the format for those, the format for the real exam, which you said at some point in the future, will be the same format as those mocks and sample papers you may have done. But just as a reminder, really, just to get the discussion going, it's a 1 hour duration, and you are allowed in certain circumstances to ask for additional time, but you can only get awarded that if you've got the right certification for various reasons. You can apply for that. That has to be done via the APM in advance of the exam, and Training ByteSize will help you with that if you need to do that. But the standard exam is 1 hour. It's a multiple choice paper that covers the full syllabus of all the topics you would have covered, and we'll look through some of those very shortly. It's normally completed in the classroom, or quite often completed in the classroom, but because of the situation at the moment with COVID and the lockdown, that the APM has set up this facility to do these online. and you do that via a system called Proctor.U. And again, the training ByteSize team will help make sure you set up your exam correctly and you're ready to go, and they get you all set up for that. And I think Amy's going to send out some information after the call to make sure everyone's happy about how to go about using the technology to get online and do the actual physical exam. The exam is closed book, which in the classroom it means checking you haven't got any books out and you've just got a sheet of paper with you and a pencil. When you're working online, it means that you'll be effectively monitored via the Proctor.U system that makes sure you're not looking at any other information. You're just literally using what's in your head. So it's about what you've learned, and it's not about, you can't use books, there's no materials you can use, you can't use body of knowledges or study guides. It's just purely closed book, and therefore what you've learned and what's in your head. As I said, you've got 1 hour and you've got 60 questions to complete within that 1 hour. Each question is choose one from 4. There's only one correct answer per question. You might find, and I'll cover it later, that you sometimes find that 2 that look like they're right, but what it is, it would say must or most, in which case one of them's sort of right, but the other one's more right. So you've got to pick the one that's definitely right. So it's just something to watch out for. I'll cover that when we come to hints and tips later. The pass mark for the exam is 60%. So you've got 60 questions, therefore you need to get 36 or more out of 60 to pass. If I was you, I'd aim for much higher than 36. I've had people get very close, but it's much better to aim high. And if you're getting 50 out of 60 or 45 out of 60, you're doing really well. And that's the sort of figures you'd be aiming for in your practices when you're doing your mock exams. I wouldn't be doing the exam if you're only getting 25 or 30 or 35 out of 60 on your practices. You need to do a bit more preparation to get yourself up to the point where you can get, well over 40 out of 60 to attempt the exam. You've probably also seen from the APM, there's lots of information online, and probably on some of the information you've looked at, there's some real detailed information for candidates. So it's worth having a read through that as well before you sit the exam. That goes through all the sort of rules and regulations in much more detail. So that is really basically the exam format. 60 question, multiple choice, choose one from 4, 1 hour to complete, 60% pass rate. So then I've just got a few hints and tips. So if I'm running a face-to-face session before the exam, I'll always brief people on these sort of things just to make sure everyone's focused and ready to sit the exam. It's very important in that 1 hour that you manage your time well. 1 hour sounds like a long time just to put a few multiple choice question answers down, but the 1 hour goes very, very quickly, I think you'll find. So make sure you spread your time out and just work it through at a good, reasonable pace. Make sure you allow time to answer all of the questions. And as it says on the slide there, you will find that some of the questions are hopefully fairly straightforward and fairly easy. Some of them need to be read through a couple of times to make sure you understand them. And there are a few real tricky questions they throw in there. So what I'm saying about working through at a reasonable pace means if you get the first couple of questions that are quite tricky, what I don't want you to do is get stuck on those questions. So just move on, just keep going and make sure you keep working through the paper. And once you've finished, if you've got any that you've missed, you can then go back and fill those in afterwards. What you don't want to do is spend 10 minutes trying to work out one question. It's much better to move on. You haven't got to get 100% to pass, you've got to get 60% or more. And the sort of the point is reiterated there because it's quite an important point. If you get stuck on a question, the best approach is to move on. But before you move on, if you've got 4 choices and you've worked out that 2 of them are definitely wrong, just in your mind identify those 2. So when you come back to look at it later, you're then only going to pick 1 from 2 possible answers. So that helps you. And quite often what happens when people are working through this, they'll leave a question, they're not sure about it, they crossed out the 1 or 2 that they think are wrong, and therefore it leaves them 2 or 3 to choose from. Then they'll carry on with the paper, and what they find when they read other questions later on, sometimes a later question triggers your mind and says, and sometimes it even answers one of the earlier questions for you. So if you get stuck, don't panic, just move on, and hopefully by the time you get to the end of it, when you're more relaxed, you're able to go back and finish the ones you've missed. It's definitely important to follow that through. Don't go into panic and spend 10 minutes on one question. And then the last point that's shown on that slide at the moment is watch out for the keywords, particularly most and best, and that they catch you out, particularly in an exam. And this is the point I made earlier, that sometimes it says, what is the most likely answer? What is the best solution to this? And you read it and you think, well, that one's right, and that one's also right. But make sure you pick the one that's the most right. So just make sure you read the question, make sure it's really you understand what it's asking you. The other one that catches people out is the one that's on the next slide, which is the top of this next slide, which says, be very careful of negatively worded questions. So the question will say, what is not? Which one of these is not a role of the sponsor? And you read it, and you start reading through the answer, and you think, well, that's right. The first one's right. So you tick it because you've missed out the word not. Even though in the paper, they often put it in capitals and in bold, people still don't read it. So just be very careful when it says negative. You've got to read it carefully and then go through. Quite a good approach if you've got 4 to choose from is to tick the ones that are right, and then they'll be left with one that's wrong, and that's then the right answer. So just be careful of those negatively worded questions. Next point on my slide is read the questions carefully. And the reason I'm saying that is because sometimes if you've done lots of practice questions in advance, you've gone through stuff and you read a question, you think, oh, I've seen this before, I know what the answer is, it's this one, and you go with it and move on. But it may not be quite the same question. It's either worded slightly differently, it's given different possible answers, or they've made it negatively worded. But just be careful you actually read the questions they've given you. Don't assume you know what it's about. Make sure you read it clearly and carefully, and then answer it clearly and carefully. The other thing that people often say is, oh, if I've got a question wrong and I've changed my mind, can I go back and change it? You can. If it's a written one, you can just do it in pencil, you rub it out and do it. And I believe you can also do it on the online version as well. You can go back and change your answers. However, it's normally best to stick with your first answer because your mind, because you're in the process of doing this course and you're ready through the exam, your mind tends to know the right answer almost intuitively. Your gut instinct tells you the right answer. If you get to the end and you've got a bit of time left and you go back and start changing them, people often change from the right answer to the wrong answer. So be very careful of changing your answers, unless you realise you've misread the question, and then you know it's right, and then you change it. So you're going to work through all of the paper right the way through till you get to the end, all 60 questions. Hopefully you get finished within the hour, so you've got a bit of time at the end just to check back through your paper. Make sure you haven't missed any questions. Make sure you haven't put 2 answers for one question. You've only got the one answer. And then once you've done that, you're going to submit your paper, and that's it. The last point there is saying, so that's the hints and tips around doing the PFQ exam. The last point there, it says that the mock and sample papers to be done for practice. Hopefully you've all had a go at doing some of those. You can use the training ByteSize materials. There's versions online you can have a look at. So the more you do, the more practice you do, and the more you work out, if you get them wrong, work out why you get them wrong, the more chance you've got of passing when it comes to the real exam. Improve your understanding of what it is, which bits are missing, which bits you need to work more on. And at that point, I think, Amy, it's probably that's the format, the exam hints and tips. If we open up the call to any questions just about the exam stuff, and then after that we'll look at any topics. Again, that might generate some more questions. So Amy, do you want to open up to questions?
Yeah, of course. Actually, everybody's been really quiet this morning, so we haven't had any questions submitted. So I'll give you guys just a couple of moments. If you do want to submit something, now's the time to do it. We are going to have question and answer session as well at the end. So if you think that you don't have anything to ask right now, don't worry, there is going to be another opportunity later on. Actually, Ewan has just asked what the lead time for exams is at the moment. Now that's, I mean, Terry, I can answer that. I don't know if you want to, or if you want to leave it to me.
I think it's probably a good idea, because I don't know the answer how long is that in terms of how long it takes to book your exam, or is that about results coming back afterwards?
Yes, how long it takes to book. So at the moment, it's about 2 weeks we need notice for, and that is purely because of the environment that we're living through at the moment. Everybody is wanting to do online exams. So what we would say is give a maximum of 2 weeks notice. I'm pretty confident you're going to get it less than 2 weeks, to be honest. But 2 weeks just gives you that little buffer period to make sure that you're not waiting any longer. So I hope that helps you. And we just had one come through from Ash. Oh, don't worry, Ash, that's fine. So yeah, don't worry, I'll come back to you, Ash. I'll come back to you on that separately.
Okay.
Ricky, yes, you can pick a date to take the exam. So when you're booking online, you pretty much choose your preferred date and time. So you submit that as a preference, and then what we do is everything that we possibly can to meet your desired date and time. It's just a case of fitting in with everybody else at the moment, which is why we're asking for this 2-week lead. Anyone else got anything that they want to ask at this point? Ricky, okay, what if you have trouble with the internet during the exam? You really don't want to have trouble with the internet during the exam, because ultimately it's going to be down to you to resolve that. So what I'm doing at the end of this session today, we're recording this webinar, so you'll be getting this coming through to you again. But I'm also going to be sending out a couple of attachments as well. So that's going to help you with testing your connection, testing Proctor-U, and making sure absolutely everything's in place, because if the internet goes down for whatever reason, it is going to be ultimately the onus is on you. So it's going to be paying to sit the exam again. So you really want to make sure that you're doing absolutely everything possible to prevent you paying twice. So those notes that I'm going to send out, they are going to help. Colin, let me just see, how long before you know the results of your exam? It's a couple of weeks. PFQ tends to be a little bit quicker. PMQ can take up to 6 weeks. Again, it's all down to the pressure that we're all under at the moment in terms of skeleton staff at APM. You know, it's different working patterns at the moment for absolutely everybody. So I would say give yourself a couple of weeks to be prepared for that result to come through. It might come through quicker, but again, 2 weeks is probably better. It's better to be surprised than to be disappointed. That's what we always say. So if it comes in quicker than 2 weeks, you'll be fine. Right, I am going to pass back over to Terry now.
Okay.
To carry on with the rest of the webinar.
Thank you. All good questions. So thank you very much. So let's just move on. So what we're going to do now is just really sort of get the conversation going about the topics. What I've got at the moment is just on the slide that's showing that is a list of all the topics that come up normally in a project management training course for PFQ. That's our standard list of topics. So hopefully by now you've gone through all of those topics and you've got a good understanding of all of those areas, because they're the sorts of things that are likely to come up in the exam and can be examined. I'm not going to go through all of those now because it would just take forever. To run the course, normally we spend about a day and a half. We've got about half an hour, so I'll hopefully leave time at the end for some questions. But what I do want to do is just want to go through, I picked out a few slides from our training courses just to pick up on a few topics, just to get people thinking about it. And if you've got any thoughts about it once we've finished, you can ask some questions around the topics or any of the content of the course, or likely questions to come up. Happy to cover any of those. And again, if you've thought of any more exam type questions, we can cover those at the end as well. So that is the full list of topics. Let me just move on the slide, look at the first one, which is really about characteristics of a project. So they sometimes pick up on points in here, you know, things like projects are about delivering major change. They're about delivering change. They're not business as usual, they're moving stuff from business as usual, moving things on, making things different, delivering something that wasn't there before, to delivering a change. Projects are also about delivering a benefit, and that's where the business case comes in. Projects only deliver benefits if are only viable if the business case is only viable if the benefits outweigh the costs and the risks. So again, a key characteristic of a project is the business benefits. And it's worth being aware of that. They're quite often focusing on the business case. Do the benefits outweigh the costs and the risks of doing the project? All projects have specific objectives. They've all got an aim. They're all trying to get somewhere. We all try and set deliverables and try and deliver goals. Projects use resources, and by resources, just be careful with the term resources. I'm sure you're familiar with it from your training, but resources doesn't just mean people. It refers to people, equipment, tools, vehicles, accommodation, space, whatever it happens to be. So it can mean all of those things. It doesn't just result on people resources. Projects always have an associated timescale, so they've always got a clear start and defined finish. They don't come to an end. They're not really projects. Projects, you get an objective, you deliver the project from the start to finish. When you finish, you hand it over into operations, into BAU, and the project finishes. So they always come to an end. The next on the list, it says projects have got specific costs, which they have. They've normally got an agreed budget that you're working to. That budget is normally attained by the sponsor from corporate management or from program management, and the project manager is about managing the budget within the agreements. Projects also are about quality. You'll have seen when you're studying the time, cost, quality triangle. Really important that we understand where the benefits sit. Where the balance sits between time, cost, and quality. What's most important to the sponsor? So quality is important. Terms that are often used in the exam around quality is delivering what's fit for purpose, meeting the customer's agreed requirements. That's what we mean by quality. So quality isn't always about delivering the highest possible quality you can deliver. It's about delivering what the customer wants or what's been agreed they actually want. A couple of other points there: innovative, risk-taking, proactive. Yeah, so projects tend to, because they're introducing change, they tend to take more risks. They tend to make things happen, rather whereas BAU tends to be risk averse and not want change to happen. The last couple of points, they're just saying that projects, you tend to use specific management processes, and the bit that's been added in brackets there should be applied consistently across all projects. It's been added because particularly there was a question a while ago that came up around that area. So projects have to have processes that are consistent across projects, and there is no minimum size for a project. They can be whatever size they need to be. They do get to the point where they get so big that they're unmanageable. You end up breaking them into programs, but that's a different story. So that's really the characteristics of projects. So they can pick on all of those sort of elements and question you around them. So just try and think about them. You know, think about risks and issues. Think about the difference between risks and issues. A risk is an uncertain event that may happen, can be positive or negative, whereas an issue is something that has happened. And again, hopefully from your studies, you'll have picked up that issues can be broken down into issues or problems. Problems are ones that the PM can deal with without need to escalate. Issues are ones that they need to formally escalate. So all of these sort of things they can pick up on during the foundation. I've also got a slide there that shows the project life cycle. Again, it's quite important for your exam. You've got that picture in your head. I'm normally going to talk it through right the way through from concept right the way through to termination. I'm not planning to do that today because it's not a training event. It's just to make sure in your minds you've got that picture in your heads of the project life cycle, made up of concept, definition, development, handover, and closure. The bit to the right of that, the benefits, realization, and operations, is referred to as the extended project life cycle. Again, that can catch people out in foundation questions. And the final bit, which includes the termination on the right-hand side, is about the product life cycle. So that's when the product, that spans the whole thing, from when the product was first thought of at the start of concept through to when it's disposed of or terminated at the end of termination. So that's that overall product life cycle. So again, be careful when you read the questions. If it's referring to the project life cycle, it means the concept, definition, development, handover, and closure. The other things that often get referred to in the exam questions are the gate reviews, the stage reviews, the post-project reviews, and benefits reviews. Again, it's worth reminding yourself the gate reviews happen between the phases of the project life cycle, which are the two red diamonds shown on that diagram. The stage reviews happen normally during the development cycle, and the stages happen when we've broken our development down into chunks, manageable chunks that we can deliver. Remember also that the gate reviews are there about key decision points, go, no decisions, yes, no decision points, about whether we're happy to move from concept to definition, whether we move from definition to development. And it's the sponsor that's the ultimate decision maker at those decision gates. And then finally, towards the end there, you've got the handover and closure, and you've got the post-project review, which is the yellow circle, happens once we finish doing, once we hand it over. Notice it's sat between handover and closure. So we hand over the project to the end users on the right hand side of the diagram, as it were. Hopefully they accept it, and they'll accept it if we've delivered what we've agreed we're going to deliver. And then if they accept it, and we can then close it down. So that's the handover and closure part. And that's really where the project success is measured as well. At the end of handover and closure, that's where we measure whether the project's been delivered, what it planned out to deliver. Notice also that the benefits realization sits to the right of that, and it's the benefits that come later. The success of the project is down to the project manager. The benefits of the project are really down to the sponsor, because it's the sponsor that owns the business case, and often the benefits are realized by the end users. So just trying to get those thoughts into your head. Notice also along the bottom there that the outputs is what the project delivers, that handover. That's the things we're actually delivering, the deliverables, the products that we deliver. Whereas the outcomes come later. So the outcomes are once the people who you're handing over to start to use the outputs that we put into operations. So all of these things are the things you need to be thinking about. Just get that picture in your head. If you've got that life cycle in your head, it'll help you with quite a lot of the questions. There might be some questions on that towards the end, but we'll come back to that when I finish going through these next few slides. The next slide I just picked out of the training course is the one about stakeholders. It's called the stakeholder mapping grid. And the reason I picked that out is because it's quite important that on projects, and that we think about who the stakeholders are. The stakeholders being all the people that are involved in the project, interested in the project, or impacted by the project. So they're all what we mean by the stakeholders. People sometimes talk about the senior stakeholders being the more senior people involved in the project. Important with stakeholders that we engage as early as possible, normally during concept and certainly by definition stage. So we've got engagement with all of our stakeholders. So we've got we know where they sit in our mapping grid. We know how much interest they've got. Which bits are they interested in? Are they interested in costs or timescales or quality? How does the project affect them? So in other words, what's their level of interest? And what people tend to do is they map them out on a grid like this one that's shown here. We map out the stakeholders. Are they for or against the project? Have they got lots of interest or not very much interest? And also, very importantly, how much power or influence have they got over the project? In other words, can they stop it? Can they take the budget away? Can they put a spanner in the works and stop us doing what we want to do? So it's really important we understand the stakeholders, who they are, where they sit on that matrix, and then from that we can work out how we're going to go and communicate with them throughout the project, how we're going to try and influence them if we need to. And we normally record that in what's called the communication plan, which is part of the project management plan. And those of you who remember back to the earlier diagram, we produced a project management plan at the end of the definition stage, where the project manager produces that. And I always think of that as being the baseline, the starting point for our project. So we produce our project management plan, including how we're going to communicate with all the stakeholders. That project management plan includes all the plans and the costs and the timescales and the risks we've identified so far. And all of those things go in the project management plan. And that's what gets approved before we move into the real delivery under the development phase. So again, just a diagram that's what gets you thinking about stakeholders. Quite an important part of the material. The other one that's also important is this one I picked out, which is the project roles. I think it was actually for the PMQ. Somebody asked about the project office and what the role of the project office was. So I just thought I'd put this slide in, because this slide shows very nicely the organizational structure for a project. It shows the sponsor at the top being the person that's owning the project, setting the direction, making the decisions, owning all the risks, getting the funding, wherever it's coming from, supported by the project board, sometimes called the steering group, the senior stakeholders. They support the project sponsor to make decisions. They've got the authority, they help resolve conflict and set priorities, those sorts of things. And normally they're represented by a senior user and a senior supplier. So you've got the sponsor looking after the business case and the business reason for doing the project. You've then got the project board looking after the interests of both the users and the suppliers at a senior level. And then below that, the next level down, you've got the project. We'll come back to the assurance in a second. We've got the project manager sat below that as well. And the project manager is the person that's working on a day-to-day basis, delivering the project, keeping control, setting the priorities, setting the work on a day-to-day basis to make sure the work progresses and the project's delivered within the time and cost and quality constraints that have been set and agreed with the sponsor. And effectively, it's working on behalf of the sponsor to deliver the project. And then at the very bottom there, you've got what are called the team managers, and they're the teams that they're the people that run the teams that are delivering the real work, the project work, the physical work. So if you're building a house, they're the bricklayers and the people, the roofers, the people actually doing the work. So the project manager is coordinating, project sponsors, decision making and owning the project, and the team managers are managing the teams of people that are doing the real work down the bottom. And then the other two I've mentioned, you've got the project audit on the left-hand side. That's an independent role, independent of the project delivery team, and that's really there to, as it says there, to assure and check and conduct audits on the delivery of the project. And it's about feeding back to the sponsor to give confidence back to the sponsor that the project management team and the project team are doing the work as been agreed, as per the plans, as per the quality criteria, as per the project management plan. It's all been run in the right way, it's meeting the governance terms, all of those sorts of things. That's really what assurance looks after. And then the last one is on the right hand side there, the project office, and that's often centrally, but it can be within for a project team, it can be held centrally within a program team, it can be a central office function that's there just to provide admin support for the project manager and the team managers. And sometimes they take on other roles as well. You might have got as far as the configuration librarian, which is what my next slide's about configuration management. The configuration librarian looks after the configuration management database and tracks the versions of all the documents and all the products that we're producing. But they often sit within the project office, if there is a project office. So that's the project roles. Hopefully that's picked up on a few thoughts. It might have got you thinking about some questions. Then just moving on again, I mentioned configuration management, which is the bit that's often done by the project support office. This is a topic, and the reason I've added this one is because it's a topic that often confuses people. Configuration management is really, I always think of it, it's really the version control of all of the products and all the documentation from the projects. It makes sure everyone's working to the latest version. It makes sure that versions don't get changed just without anyone knowing about them. So, for example, on documents, we go from version 1 to version 2, we edit it, we make a new version. It's about making sure everyone's working to the latest version of the documents, but also the latest version of the products. If we're building something, we're building a house, it makes sure we're working to the right plans. It makes sure we're using the right type of fittings, we're using the right type of electrical sockets, we're using the right type of windows. And we all know if they've been updated, and the only way we can update the configuration is by doing a change control, which is another topic that's closely linked to configuration management. My slides don't cover it, but hopefully you cover that during your training. The bit that people struggle with configuration management is remembering what the terms are. The way I remember it is perhaps I can see vampires. That's the way most project management trainers remember this. Perhaps I can see vampires. P.I.C.S.V, planning, identification, control, status accounting, verification and audit. And to be honest with you, at foundation level, you just need to be aware of those terms. I mean, planning is clearly planning what we're going to do, how we're going to run our configuration management for this project. Identification is identifying all the products and the documents we want to track in our configuration management system. And then the control bit is the bit that the configuration librarian takes care of and keeps day-to-day control of all the products and documents. So make sure any changes are controlled and updated and everyone's aware of the changes. And that's the bit to say that the configuration librarian does. And then the two boxes on the right-hand side, status accounting is really about like the database that tracks all this documentation and all these products. It's like taking a printout from that database and saying, okay, what's the latest status of all of my products? What version are we currently working to? Really useful for the project manager to check that we know what versions we're meant to be working to. Also very useful when it comes to handing over the project at the very end. You can then hand over effectively an asset list of all the products that you've produced, keeps a track of all the documentation in the same way. And then the last bit, the verification and audit, is the bit that's picked up by the assurance teams, and that's about really checking, are we following what we've said we're going to do within our configuration management system. So again, just a very quick run through of configuration management, but it's one of those topics you might want to have a quick think about, have a look at before you sit your exam, just to remind yourself of those key points. The other bit I picked up on, I thought it would be worth bringing into the slides today just to get your thoughts going, was about scheduling. This bit often catches people out. This is actually a critical path analysis slide I've shown here, which is a schedule. And you have to be familiar with, when you're training, we work out the scope of the project. the scope is defined in the work breakdown structure, and the scope says what all the activities are that we need to do. That's what the activities are in the work breakdown structure. Whereas scheduling takes that scope and works out the logical sequence, the order in which we're going to do stuff, and it puts in all the dependencies. And the dependencies on the diagram are shown as the arrows. This is called sometimes referred to as an activity on a node network. So it's showing all the activities, and those of you who've done the training will have hopefully looked at how to do that. I'm not going to work it through now because it just takes too long, but it's working through the activities, which activities can happen before which, and the numbers show how long. The red numbers at the top is how many days, the duration, how long we think each activity is, and the other numbers are showing this early start and early finish, the late start and the late finish. And by working that through, you can work out the estimated duration of the project, which in this case, you can see is activity F finishes on day 16. So assuming we put some activity durations into this network, we've worked out this project's going to take us 16 days. And we can also do what's called the backward pass through the network and work out the total float. Typical questions that come up on this are more, they don't ask you to do the diagram, they don't ask you to do the calculation, but they might ask you what is total float, and what is free float, and what is the critical path. I'm not going to ask anyone, but I'll tell you what it is. So the total float is how much an activity can be delayed without delaying the project. That's total float, and it's total float per activity. The other term that's often used is free float, and free float is how much an activity can be delayed without affecting any other activity. And we use float to work out which of the activities we can afford to let slip a little bit. And therefore, from that, we can also work out from the total float where the critical path is. And on this diagram, the critical path is defined as the path of zero total float. So you can see the critical path from this diagram is activity A, C, E, and F. And the reason you can see that is because at the bottom middle there, the total float, which is the middle of the box, is zero for all of them. So it's the path of zero total float. So that's worked out the critical path. The critical path sometimes defined as the longest path through the network. It's also sometimes defined as the shortest path, the shortest duration a project can take. So again, those sort of terms sometimes come up in some foundation questions, so be aware of them. The other terms that sometimes come up are leveling and smoothing. I'm not going to go through the detail behind this, but leveling and smoothing are ways of, once we've worked out our schedule, working out which activities can we move around to try and meet our requirements. And the smoothing is the top diagram there. It's saying where we're limited by time, so we can't let the project go beyond our target finish date. We sort of smooth our resources around within that. We make best use of our resources. We make most efficient use of our resources without letting the project finish date slip. So that's called resource smoothing. The bottom diagram is showing a thing called resource leveling. And resource leveling is where we're limited by the number of resources we've got available. You can see that there's no resource limit put in that's pushing down. So resource limited leveling means we're not going to go above that limit, and as a result, normally our project ends up running late. So leveling normally makes the project run late, whereas smoothing maintains the end date. And again, for foundation, it's just terms you want to make sure you're familiar with, leveling and smoothing. Okay, how are we doing for time? 22. So I've just got one last slide, then we'll be ready to open up for questions and answers, I think, Amy, for the end. So the last question, the slide I brought up is, it's just, I picked on one of the people-y type slides, because as you know, the APM, the method likes to look, it doesn't just look at the structure, it looks at people. Because projects are partly about people. 50% of the work's about getting the right people to do the right work at the right time. And it's about building temporary teams. And this is one of the models often used and referred to within the APM, this Tuckman's model of team development. And Tuckman just said that teams go through 4 main stages. They form, they get into storming, they move on to norming, and then finally get to performing. So forming is the team coming together and everyone's a little bit tentative and unsure what they're doing. Storming is when people start to get a feel of what they're doing, and quite often conflict starts to arise. Quite an important thing, that storming. Conflicts are quite important. It's good to have a bit of discussion and a bit of conflict coming out. It raises concerns. People get a chance to raise questions and say how they're feeling. It's a way of dealing with those problems, and it's a good idea if you can get that storming to happen nice and early in a project, because it helps resolve those conflicts before you move on and get on with the actual work of delivering the project. And that's when the group gets on in the norming phase and starts delivering the work and things start to happen. And if the team stays together long enough, they get to the performing stage when they're a high performing team and they're almost delivering without any support and any guidance. They just get on with it, and it just seems to be happening. There was another stage added after that, which was called adjourning or mourning phase, and that's when the team starts to break up, and sometimes that can create problems in projects. But again, that's not something that comes up particularly in foundation. And the reason I've added this slide in is just to remind you that it's not just about the structures, it's also about people. So think about some of the people issues as well. That, I think, Amy, takes me to the end of my slides. So just a quick run through of some of the topics that might come up in exams to get you thinking about it, to make sure you're up to speed on those areas so you can then go away and sit your exam. So at that point, Amy, I'll hand back to you if you want to kick off any question and answers about either about the content, but also about the exams.
Yeah, of course. At the moment, we've only had one question submitted from Ricky. So that he just wants to go back a couple of slides when you were talking about the time limited and resource limited scheduling.
Yep, I thought so.
Perfect. And he's asking, is that where overtime can come into effect?
It could be, yeah. If you really, for the top diagram, if you've really got to finish the end date, what you may have to do is effectively ignore the resource limit and bring in extra resources to deliver on that time. That could be bringing in overtime. It comes back to this time, cost, quality triangle. If your time is limited, you cannot go late, and you want to deliver the full scope of your project at a certain level of quality, the only thing you can do is spend more money to do that normally. So you've either got to make your team more efficient, you've got to get your team delivering stuff quicker, or you've got to bring in more resources, or you make them work longer and therefore work overtime. It's about this balance between time, cost, and quality. So early on in the project, you would have that discussion between the PM and the sponsor about time, cost, and quality. If they said time is the most important, then you effectively have to try and make things fit in that time. If they say, well, actually, the cost is the most important, you quite often do the resource leveling bit, which is the bottom of that diagram. So you say, okay, we can't afford any more resources, we can't afford them to pay them overtime, so therefore as a result of that, the project will probably have to run late. And it's that balance that's going on all the time. It depends on what the project's all about, whether you're trying to run time or cost, or indeed quality. Does that answer the question?
Okay, I think it does, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Terry. Thank you.
Okay.
Right, our next question is from Francesca, and she's just wondering if you're able to briefly go over the differences between linear and iterative life cycles and how the deployment baselines come into it.
I could do, but actually that might be quite confusing, because that bit is coming to box 7, which is the next version of the exam. Box 6 only focuses on the linear life cycle. The iterative life cycle comes in from new exams. The ones, I'm assuming everyone this on the course is sitting the box 6 exams, is that correct?
Yeah, they will be. So box 6 is until the end of the year.
Yeah, but if anyone wants to know about box 7, actually we're doing, I think it's tomorrow, we're doing a session, it's a podcast, I think, on the difference between box 6 and box 7. And that's where we'll talk about the difference between linear and iterative life cycles. I'd rather not cover it now because it might confuse people.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
So Francesca and everybody else who's listening, just keep your eye out for that podcast. Terry and I were chatting about this. I can't remember if it was last week or the week before now, but there's some really key points that he's going to be able to make in that podcast. So hopefully we'll have that with you by the end of the week.
But just while we're there, I am conscious that you can sit box 7. They are available as from the beginning of May. So some people might be thinking they're sitting box 7. Really clear to make that point. If they're sitting box 6, then they need to make sure they're looking at the box 6 book, the Body of Knowledge 6, and the Body of Knowledge 6 study guide, because I know there are also study guides come out for box 7 as well. So just people need to be careful at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody who's studying with us, we have made it absolutely clear. But if you book your training with another provider, like Terry said, that's a real good point. Just double check so you know 100% what you're actually studying, and then there's no surprises in the exam. Okay, we're not getting any more questions coming through. I'll just give it another second in case anybody wants to submit anything. Just a quick reminder that we're doing a PMQ revision webinar this afternoon. So if you think it might be of value to join that, just head over to our website. You can subscribe to that, or simply just send me a message now with your email address, and I'll send you a link after this. So just before we go, all I want to tell you about is if this is your first experience of PFQ, if you haven't bought your training yet, I really would encourage you to check out our website. We've got some amazing offers at the moment. We've got every single one of our foundation courses, including PFQ, including 3 months online learning and the exam. It's only £250, and we're also doing a buy one get one free offer as well. So in terms of, we're doing that because we understand where everybody is at the moment. We know that there's challenges around employment, projects are getting sidelined. We don't really know what our future is going to look like. So we want to make sure that we're doing absolutely everything we can to support you through this time. So do take advantage of it. I would like to thank Terry for this morning. It's been really invaluable. So Terry, thank you again.
My pleasure.
And if you have any more questions, like I said, drop it through on chat. You can go onto our website. We've got an instant chat function on there. You can email us at learning@trainingbitesize.com. You can speak to us. You can find us on social media. You can pretty much find us anywhere. And finally, the very best of luck to you all with your exam. Just keep a clear head. Remember that you know your stuff. Don't let your nerves get to you. And I'm sure you will all do absolutely brilliantly. So that's everything from me. Just quickly, Ricky, would we be looking to do any more of these in the future? Yeah, absolutely. Like I said before, we're not just about selling courses, we're about supporting people throughout their training and throughout their career. So yeah, doing this is really important to us. At the moment, we are focusing quite a lot on podcasts. So if you haven't come across our podcasts, head over to Apple, to iTunes. You can find them on there. You can find us on Buzzsprout. It'll be on our website under blogs. So we're discussing really important topics. In terms of webinars, we're exploring options to do one for Prince 2 at the moment, one for ITIL. So we've got lots in the pipeline. So please keep an eye on what we're doing. If you're not signed up to our weekly e-newsletter, our mail shop, then sign up to that, and you can just keep a handle on exactly what we're up to and get any freebies where you can, really. So I'll leave it there. Thank you all for listening. Have a lovely afternoon. And I hope you are all staying safe. And like I said, if you want to join us at 1 PM, you're more than welcome to. All right. Thank you, Terry, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.